Good morning. This is the Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session. It is Friday, October 13th, 2023. It is 9:04 a.m. This session is set to go until maybe a little less than 10:45.
Yes.
And we will be picking up at 1:30 and going to 4:15. This is a hybrid meeting. We're at 3000 Pacific Avenue Southeast, room 110. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. In the boardroom is Vice Chair Ty Menser. Also joining me via Zoom is Commissioner Gary Edwards, and we will be in the boardroom shortly. We have interim county manager Robin Campbell, as well as assistant county manager Rob Gelder. And we have the budget team joining us this morning for a continuation of the 2024 through 2025 budget presentations. And we are starting this morning off with the prosecuting attorney's office. Nicole, anything you would like to add before we get started?
Nicole Martinez, Budget and Fiscal Manager. Thank you, Commissioner Mejia. We're just here, as you mentioned, for the 24-25 biennium budget presentations. All the offices and departments have sat before the board and presented these policy level requests. We are doing this in accordance with state law and good practice for budgeting to be able to present all requests before the board so that all considerations can be met. So I will pass it over to our prosecuting attorney. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioner and Commissioners. I want to start off by introducing the team that I've got here. I think you probably know them already, but I'm going to reintroduce them. Seated at my left is Christy Peters, who is our Chief of Staff. Thank you very much. And so it's just a mouse click change. Okay. Okay. So Christy oversees administration and operation of the criminal division, primarily of the office, but is involved in other things such as budget preparation and so forth. Also, you all know Elizabeth Petrich, obviously, Chief Civil Deputy, who oversees administration and operations of the civil division of the office, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And then Heidi Prahota, who's our, I think the formal title is Administrative Services Manager, but basically the backbone of the office from my perspective. And I think Elizabeth and Christy would agree with me on that in terms of making sure things are running. I want to start off today by just talking a little bit, quick overview of what we do. In the prosecuting attorney's office is obviously more for the public because I know the board is well aware of what our responsibilities are. But we have, my office is divided into essentially two divisions, a criminal division and a civil division, which I mentioned just a minute ago. In terms of the responsibilities of the office, the criminal division has responsibility to review all referrals from law enforcement for potential crimes occurring within Thurston, potential felonies occurring within Thurston County, and to ultimately make decisions about whether charges are filed, and if charges are filed, to conduct the prosecution of that. It also includes, if there's a subsequent appeal, we follow the case all the way through the appellate process, potentially all the way to the state Supreme Court, and also responsible for what we call post-conviction motions, which are motions that are raised after conviction for certain kinds of relief that aren't necessarily appeals. I'm not going to do too much detail on that, but that's a huge body of work in and of itself. In addition to the felony aspect of our practice, we are also responsible for the review and prosecution of all misdemeanors occurring within the unincorporated areas of the county. And by contract, we also act now as the Tumwater City prosecutor, that we have a contract with the city of Tumwater to do misdemeanor prosecution for on behalf of their city. And then finally, we also have responsibility to review and conduct prosecution on all juvenile offenses that occur within the county. And that includes both incorporated and unincorporated areas of the county, and includes felonies and misdemeanors. So that is a very high level look at our criminal division. In the civil division, as you all know, we provide legal advice and representation to county government for people who don't really understand that that's part of the role of the prosecuting attorney. I basically analogize this similarly to the role that the Attorney General has with state government. That is our role with county government. And so obviously Elizabeth is a legal advisor to the board as well as other departments, and we have a number of other lawyers all assigned to different departments to provide legal support and advice. We also do within the Civil Division Involuntary Treatment Act hearings, which are folks who are, there is a concern that a mental health issue is causing them to be a danger to themselves or others. And there is an action filed to have them hospitalized involuntarily. We conduct those hearings on behalf of the hospital or the authority that's moving to have them hospitalized. And the last thing is our family support team. That is a contract that we have with the state. It is actually a contract that almost every prosecutor's in prosecutor's office in the state has, because we reached an agreement many years ago with DSHS and with the Attorney General's office that those would be handled at the local level. And so I have a team of lawyers and support staff that do child support enforcement. But I think it's important for the public to understand that when we do that, we are doing that on behalf of the child. And so in our mission statement, there's a reference there to representing the interests of children. That's what that refers to. We don't go in representing one parent or the other. We actually are representing the interest of the child in terms of their legal right to have the support that they are entitled to. And so that is an overview of our mission. Before I dig into the actual budget, I just wanted to make some preliminary observations and comments and maybe some requests in terms of when the board starts deliberating on this budget. So in 2003, I was promoted to the role of chief deputy in the prosecutor's office under then prosecuting attorney Ed Holm. And that was the first year that I participated in great depth in the county's budget process on behalf of the prosecutor's office. And I've been involved in every budget process thereafter, including the significant cuts we went through during the recession of 2008, additional cuts that were made, I think, in 2016, and then, of course, all of the budget concerns we had that actually didn't pan out around pandemic in 2020, I think that was. And so I've seen a lot of different budget processes and conditions. But I have to say, I've never quite seen anything like this before, where we've essentially moved from a record high ending fund balance at the beginning of the year to a call for 8% reduction by the end of the year. And all I want to do is make the observation that while I see conditions here for caution, and my request to the board is to maybe look at this as more of a yellow light than a red light, to use a metaphor there, and to slow down the growth and so forth. Moving to a cut of 8%, particularly for my office, and I'll talk about this in a little bit more when I get to our challenges, is a really drastic measure and really has the potential to inflict a lot of organizational trauma at a time where we've been dealing with organizational trauma really for the last 4 years since the onset of COVID. So I'd like to just, I guess, raise that up in terms of asking the board to think about those concerns and think about that. We will, at the end of the year, by the projections I've seen, still have a substantial ending fund balance. What my request would be that that we look at this maybe similarly to when we were going into COVID, and that was slow down, create a plan that could be looked at over the 2024 year. Put some restrictions on growth. I think that's absolutely appropriate. Monitor everything closely. I know the revenue has flattened out. It's not to zero, but it's flattening out, and that has happened across the state, my understanding, but there are projections out there that actually say that that might come back as the economy comes out of inflation and recovers. There's just so many unknowns out there. It feels a little bit like when we were coming into COVID. So instead, my request would be, let's slow down. Let's take a close look at 2024, give us a year to really look at, and if we'd have to make, some significant cuts going into 25, at least we'd have some time to brace for that, to work with our staff and our employees, and create a little bit more collaborative plan. And then there's other things, like the fact that there is a ballot measure for a public safety tax. We don't know the outcome of that yet, and what that might mean for county funding, and we're still in contract negotiations with the unions. We don't know what the outcome of that is. So that's my request. I guess my other one is, maybe you might want to consider, as we did with COVID, just doing a one-year budget again, at least for 24, and then maybe for 25, and then go back and look at going back to a 2-year budget cycle for the 26 budget. We did that in COVID. I think it gave us a little bit more flexibility to respond, particularly in year 2, when it actually turned out that COVID wasn't quite as big of a economic hit as we had forecasted or been concerned about. Because what I'm really asking for is, I just have to say that this thing came so fast. It just feels like panic, and I am a person that I pride myself in not panicking. I guess that comes from being a trial lawyer. And I think that should be considered. All right, that's my preliminary comments, and I'd be happy to talk more about that offline, individually, at another meeting, whatever. We come into this budget this year, just an initial observation. Our proposed 24 budget, if you took out all of our policy requests and just went simply on kind of base budget 23, base budget 24, is less by about 160,000. That's our estimate. So if none of our policy requests came out, we've had such turnover and substantial budget savings from our turnover, going from 2023 to 24 now. That gets captured in terms of bottom line, it actually looks like it would be a reduction in budget. That's why I say I think we could slow down and capture and see what that budget savings actually is before we walk into making drastic cuts and inflicting that kind of harm on the organization. We manage basically outside of general fund, two other funds. Our victim advocate fund, that's been a long-standing existing fund that essentially pays for victim advocacy services provided. We have very little advocacy services in our general fund budget. There is a concern afoot with that fund, and I just want to take a minute and talk about that. In the last legislative session, a bill was run and ultimately passed, which essentially eliminated the requirement for judges to impose what was called a crime victim compensation contribution on individuals who were convicted of felonies. And that was the source of revenue for this fund. So whenever somebody was convicted part of the fines and fees that they were assessed was a contribution to this fund to pay for victim services. That had been the model for many, many, many years. But last year, a bill was run to try to eliminate that in an effort to try to reduce the burden of LFOs on people being convicted of crimes. Probably a good policy goal. In fact, my association, BWAPA, supported that as a policy goal. But the trade-off was then the state would pick up the funding, the loss in funding that would happen there, which the bill purported to do. But a couple things happened. One, they budgeted only 1 year of revenue over a 2-year budget, a biennial budget. I think that was just a mistake. That somebody said, well, this is the budget we need for this year, and it got put in, not recognizing that it was actually being put in for a 2-year budget. The second thing is the formula they used doesn't come close to what the revenue was that we were actually receiving through the crime victim penalty assessment. And so my association's highest priority this next session is to fix that. So we'll be going back to the original bill sponsor and the sponsors and the folks who really supported that bill and working with them to try to, one, get the supplemental budget fixed so that we get the full 2-year funding, but then also fix the formula such that we get our funding restored. When we went to the table on this, WAPA initially said, and the reason I know this is because I'm the one that said it as the legislative chair for that group, that we can support this policy as long as the state fully reimburses the loss of funding, which they didn't do. So we're gonna try and hold them to their promise. That's why right now I'm not panicking about the Victim Advocate Fund. By our calculation, we have enough fund balance to get through the session and actually to get through the end of next year. But by the end of session, I think we'll know the future better on what that's going to look like, and we can start taking action accordingly in terms of whether we need to look at other funding sources or reduce the victim advocate program in the office. But I'm optimistic, given the representations made when this bill was run, that we can get that funding replaced.
John,
The other, oh yeah.
Are you saying that even if the amount was looked at on a 1-year basis, it's inadequate? So it needs
Yeah.
to be more than doubled?
Oh yeah, so thank you for asking that. So let me give you just some numbers, rough numbers. On I think our last 3-year average in terms of revenue into the fund from the assessments was about $250,000 a year, right? This year it was 68 from the state. So it was a huge difference, right? But even if you double that the way it should have been to about 140 or whatever, you know, we're still not even there. So that's why we're working both sides of this, if that makes sense. Yeah. All right, the other fund is an anti-profiteering fund. It's a very small fund. We use it very little because it's highly restricted money. There is a anti-profiteering statute. It's the Washington's version of the RICO law that exists federally. A lot of people have heard RICO before. Ours is called anti-profiteering. And a number of years ago, we did an anti-profiteering case where a number of assets were seized and forfeited. The law requires that that money go into a specified fund managed by the prosecuting attorney. And so that fund was created. But the money is also restricted to be used only for investigation, prosecution of other anti-profiteering cases. Those don't come around very often, and so that's why I say that fund's not used very often. And that's why it's, relatively speaking, a very small fund. All right. Unless anybody's got questions about this chart kind of speaks for itself. I just want to make a quick observation or a note here that it looks like there's a big jump here between FTEs in 24 and 25 in the proposal. Heidi was talking to the budget staff, I think, and what we came to realize is that this 25 number includes a number of project FTEs that wouldn't be regular full-time FTEs. They can talk more about that because they were having that discussion earlier, but the 95, I think we all agree is not representative of what we're not proposing 10 more FTEs for 25, at least not at this point, outside of the project positions that we have. Does that make sense?
I'll give a little bit more information. There's actually two factors that are increasing their FTEs. One of the factors is they have ARPA positions that are technically sitting in the commissioner's office, even though they report to the prosecuting attorney. And when they did some requests to fund them after the ARPA money were to run out, that increased the FTE because it moved them on the books from commissioners to prosecuting attorney within Questica. The other issue is we did a new thing with Questica this year with position reclassifications, where before offices and departments would just calculate the salary and put the salary in, but what we did this year was create a template that used the actual position and calculated the salary off of that position number, so that when they had to calculate COLAs, it would actually be reflected on that position's new salary. But when we did that, it added a new FTE for the
So it is
reclassification.
overstated.
So there's a couple factors that play into that increased number, and it's not as drastic as that.
So obviously that was a way better explanation than what I gave, but I think the bottom line is still right, and that the 95 is an inflated number. That's
Right.
not really what our FTE count would be. And thank you for that helpful explanation. Again, Victim Advocate Fund, this shows our FTEs that are being funded in that.
Can I just ask that point? Sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt you,
yeah,
but
go ahead.
isn't it, I mean, at least as to the ARPA positions that would be then extended and moved, isn't it more that your current is higher than, it's not so much that 95 is not accurate, it's that your 72 right now is really more because
That would be part of it, the 72
you've got
should
the
be higher.
ARPA ones and the suggestion is that they'll just continue on.
I think that's,
So
if
that-
I'm
so
understanding what you're saying, I think that's
The
right.
point is still valid that the jump isn't as significant as it looks.
Yeah,
but-
yeah,
It
yeah.
should be, it's an increase in the general fund.
It's actually 10 more.
The impact on that is the increase in the general fund. So when you look
Yeah.
only at the general fund,
Yeah, but but
Those
just in
FTEs
terms
are
of the
going
point
up.
of like the
Right.
increase in number of
Right.
FTs for
not the number
prosecuting
of
attorney.
people, but the work would be redirected.
Got it.
And 2 years ago, when this got set up, it was hand calculated that way. I didn't realize that was done because I wasn't here 2 years ago when that was calculated, so.
Okay.
Fix those numbers.
All right, so to move on then to look at our challenges, again, to maybe use an imperfect metaphor, but I've been thinking about this as kind of perfect storm right now for the prosecutor's office and perhaps for other agencies in the law and justice system. And so we've got all these challenges kind of hitting us all at the same time. First and foremost is in our ongoing challenge to recruit and retain our talent, particularly our attorney talent. We are way below market. We're not competing in terms of the market of recruiting positions. There are ongoing contract negotiations with the deputy prosecutors right now, but that's not been resolved, so it's kind of sitting there in limbo. And we've started, the last several lawyers we've lost have jumped to higher paying jobs at the Attorney General's office, the city of Lakewood, the city of Puyallup, I think, and I think one other city, Kent, all of which, interestingly enough, now are paying lawyers more to do misdemeanor prosecution than what I can pay them to do felony prosecution. And that's a huge barrier for us in terms of our ability to recruit and retain. That being said, we are making some headway. We have an incredibly robust internship program, and we use that as a source of recruitment. So we've just recently hired 3 of our legal interns and who have passed the bar. We have another one that is in the pipeline who's currently working under Rule 9 status I know Commissioner Menzer knows what that means. It's a limited practice ability that, but it essentially allows them to go into court, handle cases. So we work Rule 9s basically as almost the same as we do as a full deputy prosecutor. And so that has been actually the place where we've seen the most success in recruitment. And we're actually right now talking about creating a more formal and a seamless pathway from internship to employment. And I'm actually pretty optimistic about what that could look like. Whenever you turn lawyers over and you hire you lose experience and you hire younger lawyers, guess what? You got to train them. And so that's the next challenge, is trying to get people trained. We're trying to, do a lot of obviously mentoring and so forth in the office. I've been sending lawyers to as much training as we can find, most of it local through the Prosecutors Association, because it's very affordable training for us. But it is again, one of those challenges is getting both staff and DPAs trained. The backlog is still lingering out there, and our inability to recruit and hire means we haven't really been able to touch that backlog the way that I had hoped. Our project positions have not helped because I can't fill them with bodies. FTEs are there, but the bodies aren't there. We have whittled away at it a little bit. If the numbers would tell us that we are making very slow headway, but it is difficult. At the same time, the numbers are out, and guess what? Exactly what we were saying was going to happen is happening. Crime is up, referrals are up, arrests are up, bookings are up across the board. Which the reason I include that as part of our perfect storm is every one of those things comes directly into our shop and affects our shop. And so we are seeing an increase in not just all crime, but both property and violent crime. I think I may have said this at one of our meetings before, check-in meeting or whatever, that whenever I want to know the future of this county from a public safety perspective, I just look north. And sure enough, that's exactly what's happened. I was looking north 2 years ago saying it's coming and it's here. And if we look north, what we continue to see is an increase in gun crime and violent crime. And so I'm continuing to be concerned about what the future looks like in that regard. We're trying very hard to prevent burnout and exhaustion in our shop because of the low staffing. So we're taking measures to do that, which means we kind of artificially set and restrict caseloads, just like the public defender's office does, to try to keep the workload manageable. But all that does is continue to add to the backlog because we can't get to things as quickly as possible. And the next thing in the perfect storm is the body camera and digital evidence that we've talked about. It is increasing and substantial, and it is the next big body of work that we have been hit without any ability to really absorb it. So that means that the request for the reduction in our budget would have, I think, some drastic effects on us in terms of our ability to weather that storm. There's no place in my office to reduce other than core mission, right? Prosecution staff, civil staff. Those are the two sides of the house. Those are the two sides that I'd have to look at for reduction. Obviously, if that was the decision of the board, I'd have to do that very strategically in a way to try to minimize adverse impact, but there's no way around it. In the criminal side of the house, I think I can safely say that it will continue to slow down our ability to respond to the referrals. It will result in the backlog going back to growing instead of shrinking, and a continued increase in crime. And by the way, a lot of people are speculating about why crime has increased. There's a very obvious factor that strikes out to me, and that is the criminal justice system closed down for about 18 months. And guess what? Crime is up. And I think that's a clear demonstration that if the system's not working, if we're not addressing crime quickly, it's going to continue to increase. And that's my biggest fear. That was kind of the reason for my initial plea of, can we just take a year and slow down instead of going into a radical cut that might actually just not only traumatize my organization, but continue to see a continuing increase in crime, which now is, as I understand it, one of the leading issues on people's minds out in our community. That's based on my own interaction and some of the polling I've seen done in the northern counties. Okay. So that is, I'm at the point now, I think, where if I have to reduce criminal division too much further, there will be some decisions made in terms of lower priority cases, either shelved or declined to prosecute. And I also think that it would result on the civil side in slower response in terms of civil legal services. And Elizabeth may or may not want to address that as she's talking about some of the civil requests for the civil policy requests. Okay, so that's our challenges. They are considerable in my mind, and it's a, as I said, I've not seen anything quite like this before in my well, now 35 years history with the office. I want to address our number one priority proposal. And then I'm gonna ask Christy and Elizabeth to talk about the other policy proposals for criminal and civil respective to their divisions, but this is one that I wanted to speak to directly because this has direct bearing on the digital evidence issue that we are dealing with. I don't know how else to stress how considerable this issue is for us right now. But I have to tell you, I was frustrated and disappointed, and I felt a little bit betrayed during the IT presentation, where there was the representation that we're 95% of the way of making it work with GTAC, with only one issue remaining. Because I think if they had asked me or any of my staff, we would have said we're not even close to that, not even close. In fact, we are even more, I think, solid in our belief that GTAC, the GTAC system is not sufficient for us to keep up with what we're being asked to do. The tool is not robust enough. It doesn't work for us, and it actually causes more labor work. So our proposal number one is actually, it was intended originally to be a decision point for the board in terms of Justice Premier, which was, it was put in as a policy request for under IT. That's why we didn't put it in our policy request, because our understanding was that IT was going to put it in their policy request, which they did. But we were relying on them to bring that to the board and to emphasize the importance of that. On the other hand, the alternative is, if that policy request could not be funded, an additional 2 legal support staff FTEs for us, and that's minimum. That's just to get us started to do all the extra work that's associated now with digital evidence using the GTAC system. Because we're still having to download, we're still having to do a lot of manual work that could have otherwise been done automatically or much more easily in the Justice Premier, the Axon environment. And we're still having to deal with 2 different systems because the cities use Axon. Lacey and Olympia are using Axon. The county and Tumwater are using GTAC, and we have to go back and forth depending on which system we use. With Justice Premier, one of the things you may recall I said about that is that it lets us do everything in one environment. GTAC,
Is this the
Axon,
bottom,
whatever.
the body cam?
Yeah, this is all the body cam stuff.
The
But it's
public
beyond
comment?
body cams too, is because in just about every case, we're getting surveillance video because so many people have surveillance cameras out there now. We're getting phone video as evidence because we're doing forensic analysis of phones and pulling video and things like that off. So that's why I use the term digital evidence, because it's way bigger than just body cameras. So proposal number one is that it's, we feel like we either need the Axon Justice Premier environment to try to efficiently handle that with our current staffing. Or if we maintain the GTAC and have to continue to go back and forth, downloading, moving stuff manually, we need 2 FTEs to be able to do that. Otherwise, it ends up, again, as just a considerable slowdown point in terms of processing discovery. And if that slows down, the whole case slows down, because you can't, I mean, you know, right? You can't negotiate a case, you can't resolve a case, you can't try a case until the discovery is done, right? Yeah. So that's the bind that we're in. With that, I'm going to turn to Christy to go through the criminal proposals, and then there are a couple of civil as well. And I'll just let the two of you kind of go through those.
Okay, please chime in if I leave anything out. And I'll start with our priority number 2, which is to return. It says add chief criminal deputy prosecuting attorney, but our office had that position until 2019, late 2019. And so we're asking to return that position. It is been extremely difficult to run a full prosecuting attorney's office without a chief criminal position. John alluded to many of the challenges that our office has had, specifically in the criminal division, with the new attorneys coming in that need additional training, brand new attorneys needing training, mentoring, when in the past we had essentially kind of a scale or ladder of different levels of experience. That no longer exists. Now we are almost exclusively at less than 10 years, less than 7 years, less than 5 years of experience. So we've got, as John also indicated, high level, very serious violent crimes, homicides. We have more homicides right now on our in our docket than we have ever had in the history of Thurston County open at the same time. And we have very new attorneys that are being asked to work on some of those cases. We are doing our best to have them work as much as possible with a very experienced attorney. But all of this is to say that the environment in 2023 for criminal justice and the caseload that we have in Thurston County is very different than it was in 2019. So while the duties of the chief criminal position, and just to refresh everyone's recollection, the reason that position was taken away, or that we gave up, I believe, is that we were asked to make cuts going into early 2020 because of the concern that COVID and the pandemic would affect the budget. And rather than lose a line DPA, John made a difficult decision to lose that chief criminal position and ask my role, the chief of staff, to essentially do 2 roles. And that was what we did for 4 years.
Clarifying question,
Sure.
sorry to interrupt. The timing wise, because we didn't know about COVID in 2019.
No, what we had our chief criminal position leave, the actual person who was the deputy, so good question, actually vacated that position in late 2019. We were in the hiring process then in March 2020 when COVID happened, and so we stopped that position. That's what happened.
Actually, this was a proposal brought forward by the prosecutor in exchange for other positions, which the board granted.
Right, it was that's what I'm saying, that because John had to make a decision of, do I need caseload attorneys or can I have a managing attorney during this time period? And that was the decision that, we
Wasn't to
proposed.
keep existing positions, it was to add new positions.
Right, because we had lost we had lost some routine deputy prosecuting positions as far as our earlier on. I mean, I don't know if you're gonna go back to kind of the timeline of our criminal deputy positions from, for like the last 14, 15 years, but essentially our office right now, our criminal deputy prosecuting positions that are funded by the county are at 22 criminal deputy caseload positions. Over 15 years ago, in 2006, we had 20 criminal deputy positions. So we have increased 2 positions, 10%, over more than 15 years. So anyway, there's been a huge struggle with that and a balance, and no good choice is made, but in that option of making, do I need caseload attorneys, or going into COVID with this being asked for a cut, do I need the chief criminal? Made a difficult decision to give up the chief criminal position. There was no good choice there. It was a 6 and 1/2 dozen the other at that point. That being said, crime kind of slowed down. The courts closed for 18 months-ish during COVID, so it was workable. It was not ideal, but it was workable. The courts are now open at full capacity. We are now back to extreme need. Well, we're at a higher need now for the chief criminal, I would argue, than we needed even in the normal years of 2018, 2019, et cetera, because of all of the brand new attorneys that I'm talking about, all of the need for experience, mentorship, recruitment, that type of thing. So that is a very urgent need. Public safety will definitely be improved if we have better training, better access to that, better mentoring. That role of the chief criminal is very challenging now. It's been, some of the duties of that role were given to Elizabeth, some were, majority were given to my role, and some were given to our next level of management, our team leaders. But the turnover and the continued hiring has dramatically affected the need for having a robust chief criminal position reinstated in our office. Do you want me to move on to just the other criminal positions and then, okay, turn over. So I'm gonna group our policy level proposals 3, 5, and 7. And I'm sorry that they're not in order, but I think they're all, the justification for those requests are all very similar. So I'm gonna ask the board to look at 3, 5, and 7 together. And also, I think that, I hope the board notices that they are very, very small requests, but would make a huge difference in the efficiency and response of the prosecutor's office. Request priority number 3, we have currently in the criminal division 6 paralegal ones in the criminal division, roughly divided between our primary criminal division teams. What we are asking with priority number 3 is to promote 3 of those 6 positions to paralegal 2. The cost of doing that would be under $10,000. What it would allow our office to do is we are trying to assist the board in looking for efficient ways to be better address the increase in public safety and crime. This would allow a paralegal 2 would be able to do more work. They would be able to take more work off of the deputy prosecuting attorneys. It would allow us to not ask the board for additional prosecuting attorney positions at a much lower cost, increasing the efficiency, increasing the work ability of the paralegal 2. The board may be aware that in the civil division, there is paralegal 2 position. They are able to work at a higher level than the paralegal 1s, doing some of the work, the lower level motion work, that type of thing, taking that off of the deputy prosecuting attorneys, so the deputy prosecuting attorneys could arguably have a little more of a caseload and be able to get through some of these cases. So that's the basis for the request on priority 3.
And just to be clear,
Yeah.
when we say more, we mean higher level.
Higher level, I
So
apologize.
The paralegal 2 job spec allows that paralegal to do higher level paralegal work. And so the idea is they can take some of that work off the lawyers that the lawyers are doing now.
I have a question on
yes.
this. You're talking about eliminating 3 paralegal 1 positions, and I'm wondering, with turnover as it is, right, and the job market being as difficult as it is, isn't it convenient to have just entry-level positions for someone to kind of do more of a step ladder instead of just eliminating the positions?
So this is actually, I think it's a different path to the same goal that you've talked about, right? So the idea is we're eliminating 3 paralegal 1 positions, creating 3 paralegal 2 positions. But it allows, it's essentially a reclass through a different pathway to allow opportunity for internal candidates to move to that higher level classification. And, but there's no net gain or loss out of FTEs. We're basically just trying to change the job spec.
So it's akin to our assessor and CPED. I mean, we've had this discussion where
Yeah.
we really need to just build in like
step.
an automatic step.
But
So
it's
you-
not, we're
'cause-
not predetermining who gets reclassed, right? You create the position, you put it out, you allow candidates to compete for it, there's a selection, and then their incumbent position goes away. So it gives people that chance to move, internal candidates, the chance to move up. But if we don't end up saying, kind of saying, well, you and you and you are gonna move up, and the other ones don't get to move up because our contract requires us to allow them to compete for it. Does it make sense? Yeah.
So there's more than 3 ones.
We have 6
Okay.
in criminal, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good clarification.
It's
Yeah.
not 3
But
and
if
3
each
now.
of those 6 was kind of a 1/2 and classed in that way, I'm talking about sort of a bigger issue about the structure of the positions, then, and we authorize you, once we authorize that 1-2 position, then you decide what you need and who's ready to move up because they have the expertise and stuff, then that is kind of what some of the different departments have advocated for. When there's positions like that where it's like kind of a natural transition to a higher level, and that way you don't have to keep coming back and reclassing back to 1, like, and then reclassing back to 2. I mean, we've been playing that game with the assessor's office, and CPED has been talking about doing the same thing. Because there's certain types of positions where there's kind of a 2-step, maybe even 3, but usually it's a 2-step inherent in the natural progression. And then you give people and I've expressed frustration because I asked for the class and comp study to really focus on that, and they didn't really come back with what I was looking for there, but this looks like an opportunity for that kind of a structure, maybe.
That, I think that's essentially what we're trying to do. We're
Yeah,
trying.
you're just trying to do the same thing within the mechanics of the system we have.
Yes, right,
Right.
and the labor contract that exists.
Got it.
Yeah.
And it's also significant, I mean, it's the reason we're asking for 3 is because we actually have 3 dedicated criminal teams within the criminal division. So it makes sense to have 1 paralegal, 2 with each team to be able to take on some of that higher level work for the deputy prosecutors. And again, we're trying to be creative, create a ladder in a cost-efficient manner because the deputy prosecutors within the teams will be assisted by this, and it's a efficient way for the county to approach that. I'm gonna jump to 7, just because it's very similar to the conversation we were just having about the step. 7 is, we have a one position that is a 0.5 FTE, legal assistant 1, which is our lowest level, entry level position for legal support staff. We heavily utilize this position as backup here, backup there. If we get an overflow of cases in misdemeanor and need to have assistance on legal assistance as far as supporting, that's where it goes. But also, we may have a bunch of cases come domestic violence. This person can also do that type of support. What we are asking the board to do is by allowing this position to be moved to a legal assistant 2, we can utilize it even more. And more flexibility, there would be more expanded capacity. Right now, it's pretty limited within that legal assistant 1 level about what can be assigned to that 0.5 position. Again, a very reasonable request. It is not a huge cost. It's $1,700 for the court to consider that. But it would allow for much more flexibility and more efficiency and support within the legal staff to support our current caseload. And then I'll go back to number 5, the victim advocate coordinator. We are asking the board to eliminate one of our senior victim advocate positions in lieu of making 1 position for a victim advocate coordinator. This would be very helpful to have all of the victim advocates working with 1 directed leader position. Currently, that leadership position of the victim advocates relies under my position, the chief of staff, and to some extent within the different team leaders. But it would be, we have had an increase in victims. It makes more efficiency to have that position be able to lead. When it's a senior victim advocate, they can do some of that, but not all of that leadership position. And so again, I think it's a more efficient, in a, I believe, a very cost-effective way for the commissioners to look at coordinating all of the victim advocates of the prosecuting attorney's office under one umbrella and one leadership structure. So that's 3, 5, and 7. Any questions on any of those? Okay. Moving on to investigators, priority number 6. I think,
4 though.
oh, I'm leaving
Okay.
4 and 8 for Elizabeth, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, just to
No,
stick,
I just
stick
wanna
on
make
the,
sure you didn't
I'm gonna
skip it.
stick on the criminal track, what I know, and
Whatever
then
you
I'll
wanna do.
defer to my colleague who's the expert in civil. So number 6 is the investigator position. It's 2 investigator positions. I think that the board has had some preliminary updates about our request for investigators. We've actually been needing this for quite some time, but it's becoming increasingly a need. This probably aligns with some of the requests that the sheriff made, but all of the law enforcement, due to the increasing requirements and the low staffing within law enforcement, the ongoing investigation and follow-up that used to be routinely done by detectives and law enforcement officers is, their capacity is maximum. They don't have the ability to do the same kind of ongoing investigation for cases that happened in years past. We are definitely in need of investigators for that, to locate witnesses, to do, as I said, casework, case investigation. And just this overall expedites review of cases. We do not have waiting for a detective to become available for it if we have an on-site investigator, which will obviously assist the system with moving more efficiently through the criminal justice system on everything. The piece of the investigators request is not a general fund request. This is a COVID ARPA request for all of the funding for both of those 2 investigator positions. And our office has been in discussions with Human Resources on nailing down the specifics of that job classification and job description. I think we're very close. I'll look at Heidi. She's been bearing the brunt of those conversations, but I do believe that we're very close to getting that. With the board's approval, that would be funded through ARPA through the end of 2024. And then our goal would be to transition that as part of what we hope is the public safety tax passing for the continued funding. So this is not a general fund request at this time for those number 6, priority 6 investigators.
I will say the board conceptually approved this back when we were doing our original ARPA package, but that position didn't exist in the HR job spec at the time. So there wasn't, we couldn't create the FTEs because there was no job spec yet. And so that's what's been holding this up. So conceptually, the board had agreed to fund it through the ARPA funding. And I think the reason it ended up as a policy request this year is to, hopefully if we get to the point where the spec exists, to be able then to add the FTEs and then fill them with using the ARPA funding.
So the board approved these on the ARPA through the backlog?
It was part of that
Part of
package
the
of
backlog package.
positions for the backlog, yeah. And,
So-
go ahead,
No,
Commissioner.
I was just gonna ask Robin a question on that because we set a certain amount of funding, right? And last time we had that briefing, you said, okay, it's all kind of calculated out for what we set aside for
What we
criminal
had,
justice.
yeah.
And so what the prosecutor was saying, it was in that initial package, so it's already calculated into those numbers, or is it additional ARPA?
It would at this point be additional, because we calculated how much we'd need to cover all of the backlog costs through the end of 24, given existing positions that were approved with ARPA, and these did not exist. So the board would have to add money for these at this point.
So if, assuming there's no public safety tax, how far will that get us to the end of 2020? I can't remember the,
Well, we've got them through 24, but you may recall that funding staff after December 31st of 24, anything you spend for the next 2 years through the end of 26 has to be obligated. And you may recall the conversations we've been having about if staff can be considered obligated. It's a gray area, and an area that I think that we can make a case for because of the way we hire staff and the employment letters that we issue. I think we can make a strong case that that becomes an obligation of the county if our employment letters reflect that they're through the end of 2026. So we only calculated through the end of 24 because that's the direction that we've been given to extend all of the positions, including this one, through the end of 26. We'd have to figure out how much more that would cost and if you still have unearmarked ARPA money available, because that's dwindling fast.
I think we need to have this conversation in an ARPA setting because we really need to figure out if we have that availability, right? I mean, the backlog is still there. And if there's a possibility to kind of stretch it out till 2026, I want to be able to have that conversation with the board and see where that funding is going to come from on which of the buckets and just
Right.
how much more it would cost us to do that.
So
two
we'll-
issues really. I mean, because I'm really uncomfortable if we were limited by law or policy guidance to 24, I would not, and I'd say I'm really sorry that we weren't able to get that from the outset, but it would not make sense to me to try to fill those positions and have them be less than a year probably.
And I think I would tend to agree with you, Commissioner, right? Because the proposal here is for the biennial budget. We put it in, right? And obviously, there's, depending on how this plays out with ARPA funding, we understand that could be a little bit dynamic, but bottom line is we wanted to have it in here, so the placeholder's here. And then I'll say I certainly will offer assistance of my office in terms of helping develop whatever arguments we need to make for that extension, because just listening to Robin, I'm thinking that makes perfect sense to me that once you hire somebody, you're obligated.
All depends on when that end date is.
If you move that end date anyway.
Exactly,
you're
I think we
obligated.
could rewrite the
Yeah.
employment letters, extend the end date, and make a valid case to any auditor.
So I have another question in regards to that. You mentioned it would be through ARPA funding through 2024, maybe 2026, depending on how that, and then the rest would be covered through the public safety if that were to pass. Now, there is a no supplanting clause in the public safety, and so I'm just wondering how that would work.
The way I look at it, and I think this is a conversation we have once we know the results of the election, obviously. But when you look at supplanting, if there are project positions that were never anticipated to be long-term positions that go away, if you essentially create positions in response to that to continuing or additional need, I think there's a good argument you're not supplanting, and we've actually used that argument in the past with regard to treatment sales tax money, if I recall.
That's right.
So you could fund it from
so,
like 27.
Yes.
And it's another good reason to make sure, at least at this point, that we're intentional about positions that remain project positions until we know what the results of that election are.
We also, when it comes to supplanting, it's generally considered supplanting of county funds. If state money goes away or federal money goes away, that's not considered supplanting. If you're backfilling
Okay.
lost revenue.
Just making sure.
Okay,
Last priority from the criminal side is number 9, and that is the community program manager for, which is creating a full-time position from funding that would, the Washington Traffic Safety Commission will be fully reimbursing this. Right now, it's roughly half of that. The Traffic Safety Commission has additional funding. They actually approached us with the idea of saying, would you consider a full-time position so that there's more public safety as far as road safety, data-driven patrols, traffic, to reduce traffic fatalities and serious injuries. I know that this is, again, a kind of a side note of the comments we've already made regarding increase in crime, but there has been an increase in traffic fatalities. There is an increase in serious injury, and allowing this position to now be a full-time position from the community program manager for that. We said, of course, we will talk to the board about creating this now a 1.0 program position. And as I indicated, the $117,389 will be reimbursed fully from the Washington Traffic Safety Commission for that position.
So there's grant revenue booked with this.
Yeah.
Great.
So that's not how it's on our cheat sheet, so, just so everybody's.
I did not identify revenue on the cheat sheet. Because there's no second year, is that what you're talking about?
It just says general fund, I'm just,
It would go into the general fund. It's still a grant, but it would go into the general fund.
so essentially the grant money goes through, it's funneled through the general fund, so
Right.
the position exists in the
Yeah,
general
the
fund.
position exists in general fund.
Okay.
The state gives the money
Money,
to the
yeah,
general
goes
fund to
into
pay
the
for that
It's
position.
offset.
Yeah.
It's a grant. It's a no-brainer.
And
if
we
it
have,
wasn't a
we've
grant,
done this for years, 10 years, 12 years.
Yeah. the
Always
target
at
zero
about,
project.
always at a 0.5. This was
Yeah.
the time that they asked us to consider a full, moving it up.
and the half that we have is funded by the state?
Yep.
or the state. And if it wasn't, it would fit to the road diversion.
Yes, good.
I actually think you're
Actually
right.
could.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I'd love to get in another fight with
with
what's
crab,
that board? Yeah.
crab.
Crap.
And Commissioner
Administrator.
Mejia is now
I'm ready
on
to
that
go
board.
again.
I'm on the board this round.
Good, we got some influence there.
Yeah,
And
All
we
right.
got a new thing we could fight with them about too.
with that, I will
you
turn
got
it over to Elizabeth for the civil.
Okay, thank you. Fortunately, the requests from Civil Division are rather modest. But one of our challenges that we briefly reviewed at the beginning is that the legal support for Civil Division does not match the needs of the clients in the future. But one way we've been very fortunate, we've had a very consistent, strong and talented staff of deputy prosecuting attorneys in the Civil Division. And they're the new attorneys we brought on, highly capable, and they do a lot of work in litigation. And one of the things about litigation is you need dedicated staff support to be able to manage those cases. And one of my concerns has been in the last year or two with these new talented attorneys that have come from the AG's office. They're not saying this, but my concern is they're not getting the legal support that they need to manage these cases. And I don't want to lose these attorneys, so we're trying to provide better, our requests are tied to legal support, staff legal support. The first position, policy request number 4, will not have an impact on the general fund because this is a position that supports the, we're requesting that we have basically a reclassification of an LA2 who manages the ITA hearings to a paralegal one, because that's the work that this person is doing. And they are doing an incredible job supporting not only our attorneys that attend these and manage these hearings, but also the other agencies that are tied into the ITA court process, the court itself, the clerk, several different mental health agencies that are bringing in these patients. So the request is to, policy number 4 is to make the LA2 person into a, or fund, will reclassify and create a paralegal 1 position. We only have paralegal 2 positions in our office, but a paralegal 1 position to manage the ITA calendar. And that cost would be fairly minimal because it's not creating a new position, it's just bringing it up from LA2. It would be $4,500 for 2024 and $4,700 for 2025. And again, that is not being directly impacting the general fund because it's being reimbursed by BHO. The second request is for a legal assistant to create and add a legal assistant 2 position to the civil division.
Which one is that one, sir?
Which number is that?
That would be.
Priority 8.
Priority 8. So priority 4 is to create a paralegal 1 position, not create, but reclassify from LA2 to a paralegal 1. And that would not have a direct impact on the general fund. The second policy request would have a direct impact on the general fund, and that would be to create an LA2. Again, going back to supporting the excellent legal attorneys we have on staff, we want to continue to provide that support across the board because they need it and we don't want to lose them. So this legal 2 position would again be able to provide more support and take away work from the paralegals who are the ones that are really supporting the attorneys, especially in litigation. And you probably know we have more litigation, not only in the ITA calendars, but in the risk pool as well. And we've been taking on more of those cases in-house rather than outside counsel. And even when we do have outside counsel, there's incredible support that our office provides to outside counsel because we have the contacts in the county to work with staff that are involved in the cases. So those are our requests for the.
Elizabeth,
How would that be paid?
yeah, how are you, what do you think, general fund, or could we take it out
Oh,
of?
Legal
The
assistance
90,000.
would primarily be general fund.
But could it
So
come
would
out
be
of something
general
else?
fund.
Well, there's a potential that it could come out partially because they'd be supporting the ITA calendar, which is.
Yeah, so bill the whole thing to them.
Right, so there's some of that, for sure. Other than that.
All we need's a legal opinion.
Oh, with the new.
That's all you need.
That's all we need.
Yeah.
Let the auditor know.
I got lots of those.
So the BHO, there's a change in the structure, how they reimburse our costs. We're not any longer just simply reimbursed for the expenses. It's gone to a rate.
Yeah, now it's a
straight
flat
rate.
rate.
Yeah,
and it
it's
has to be
flat
built
rate.
into
We
that
had,
flat
we
rate.
had to, under state law, and apparently we should have been doing this all along. We need to determine a rate per case. So when you raise costs, we don't get an increase
Well,
in
why
that.
can't we give it an overall
Rate.
raise the rates?
Because the law, state law tells us how we have to compute that rate. And it has to be an average of the costs in the prior 3 years. So eventually an
Eventually we would
increase
get
in
it.
cost would raise the rate, but it'd be a while before we saw revenue. There's no longer a direct one-to-one relationship between what we spend and what the BHO it reimburses.
They can this person could oversee the 2 ARPA people that
Oh,
Just
can
need an
bill it to
opinion.
ARPA.
we.
He's like,
You talked about the
I
risk
feel like
pool.
you guys just lead a legal opinion, like, and then Shirley's like, we're the board members of the VHO.
I was like,
Fix it.
So I do wanna clarify though, that the legal division is part of the cost plan, the civil division. They're part of the county cost plan, so it's that 60-40 split. The civil division tracks their time, and their time is billed appropriately to the offices and departments that they support. So I'm curious, I heard you say something about the support to the risk pool and the litigation in the risk pool. I'm wondering if we can't bill a significant part of this new FTE to the risk pool. Tammy won't like that, but
I don't have the answer to that, but that's something to explore.
we'd have to see how the work would be.
Can we, yeah,
allocated.
can we explore that and then once we
Yeah,
go into deliberations,
can
it can
look
be
at that.
presented to us. Definitely, I think you've heard we're open to exploring, we're very open to exploring different methods of funding for this.
Anything that doesn't hit the general fund or another fund that we see going.
Okay.
Any other questions or
think that's all of
clarification?
our-
Thank you, Robin.
Proposals.
Okay, I know that you have the policy level proposals reserved for public safety sales tax. We have a briefing scheduled for that when?
This afternoon?
For
No.
public safety sales
PST?
tax.
No, public safety.
Oh, public safety, yeah, no, I'm sorry.
Tuesday.
It's coming next.
Tuesday, October 24th.
We added that to the slideshow just to give you kind of a preview of what we're thinking in terms of that, but I knew there was another meeting in the future, so
guys are
I
part
wasn't
of that meeting?
expecting.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
we're
wasn't
inviting
expecting
you.
to address that today.
We just
that's
wanted
why
to
I
give
kinda
you a
skipped that
little
over.
heads up
Yeah.
of what we're looking at.
Thank you. Okay, any questions for the prosecutor? Go ahead,
Well,
Commissioner.
I don't know if I have questions, but I think the public is entitled to understand what we're up against. Because John gave a pretty good layout of what he's up against, which is 100% justified in my estimation. But, you know, you mentioned the perfect storm that we're kind of up against. And this county has never prioritized law and justice. I mean, that's just the bottom line. You can look at the sheriff's office funding. They've always been within the bottom tier of the bottom one or two out of 39 counties. So that's just the reality that we've been stuck with all along. And this whole thing about, from a societal standpoint of defund the police, you know, the police are the problem, all that type of thing, that hasn't panned out very well. And that is, therein lies our problem with the whole crime escalation end of things and your shortfall of people. The sheriff is missing, he's down 45 deputies between the jail and his operations end. So he's got the same dilemma that you have. And it seems like when it comes to revenue, all of our revenue is down considerably, whether it's sales tax, REIT tax because of the housing dilemma that we're in, the filing fees that go along with REIT, above and beyond REIT, that's all down. So we're in trouble there, and we've actually got a situation today where our employees, if they get a 4% raise, they're getting at least a 10% cut over this last 2-year cycle, where our budget is running for this 2 years. Now we're trying to figure it out for the next 2 years. They're getting a 10% cut in buying power. And so when we talk about not being able to fill, you know, because of retention or recruitment, it's a problem that I guess we're all pretty well stuck with, but this budget cycle is not gonna be easy to fill this void. And I equate that kind of for everybody to understand, it's like the price of fuel. And everything that fuel touches, whether it's delivering your groceries or any other commodity, that's all went up accordingly. And so we're kind of stuck in a situation that we just don't have the revenue coming in. And this whole law enforcement 2/10 tax we're proposing for the voters, we don't know what they're gonna say on it. We hope they pass this through. And that'll give us some relief. But right now, we're in a dilemma.
Yeah, I agree with you that these are tough times, and I also want to echo your statement in terms of, we've not emphasized public safety or law and justice, I think, over the last, well, 3 decades that I've been here, longer than that for you, Sheriff, well, now Commissioner, then Sheriff. 'Cause I know you've had both roles. And I think that's evident in what Christie pointed out, and that is, I only have 2 more criminal deputies now than I had in 2006, right? But again, I think it's because, for the most part, we've been relatively fortunate in terms of the public safety in this community. I think our community has felt relatively safe. It ebbs and flows, right? We had time in the late 90s, as you know, where we had big gang issues going on, where we had an issue, and then we resolved that. Then we had all the meth labs, and then they resolved that. So we kind of go through this. Right now, we're on that upswing. But what I wanted to add is that the sheriff, as I understand, was exempted from the 8% proposals, and I get in terms of the initial rationale of that they are a 24/7 response, but the bottom line is there's also gonna be the same number of referrals, if not more, coming in, and if you reduce over here, you're just changing the pinch point. So you gotta make sure you're looking at the whole system and the ability and the capacity of the whole system. And so that's why I was really asking to, because we had this record high fund balance starting this year at 43 million, at least I submit, based on what I've looked at, that you've got a year here where you can take the loss in terms of that fund balance dropping, but we can really take a deep dive into what's going on and have a year to prepare for something if it continues to drop off and the revenue continues to stay flat. And, who knows what's gonna happen with inflation. There's all these kind of unknowns out there, rather than slam the brakes out at 8%. Because I just feel like you do that and the people who hit the windshield are my folks, and I'm really worried about them.
And we actually have another fail-safe, because I think we're faced with a rainy day. We've got a rainy day fund of $4 million. And I believe that it's a rainy day.
I just wanna do a time check.
Now, that's just, we have to debate that, as
yeah.
to what we're gonna do.
I don't know what we're scheduled for.
Okay,
I did have some comments and questions and want to make sure all the commissioners
Yeah.
had a chance to.
Yeah, go ahead. We're scheduled till 9:45, but seeing that the clerk's office canceled, if commissioners have, let's go until 10:30, and then we'll cut it off.
Okay, so I guess on some of those comments that were just made, the board kept the parameters, at least for the county's portion of the public safety measure, I think pretty tight. And we did that, at least from my perspective, for a variety of reasons, one of which is to get a clear a mandate or answer from the voters. If we have chronically, the board, the county, way before any of us were here, have chronically and inappropriately underfunded public safety, then the voters can tell us that and say, we want these resources spent. So I'm really curious to see how that's gonna come out, and hopefully it comes out positively, because I do think we need the resources. I had a question about, it's kind of a larger question, but you're not the first group. In fact, you're probably, I think probably every group has come and said, our employees are way below market. And it's very frustrating for me, because we invested in a study to try to look at that. And I guess I'm wondering what your thoughts are about the flaws of that study, because the study didn't bear that out for the most part. And as a policymaker, we didn't tell the folks that contracted, like, make sure you come in and not show that we're over market. We wanted objective information. We asked them to do things that hadn't been done in the past, looking at broader across different counties, because we know we're in a unique position in Thurston County. We got the state here. We've got counties that are way bigger than us just to the north. So we didn't just look at Kitsap and Yakima. We said we want to see what Snohomish and King and Pierce and we want to see what the state's doing, because we want real information that's going to be meaningful. And we got that study back and no one's happy with it to a person. So but how do we then as policymakers go and then just start increasing pay when we don't have any real data to support it? It would just be, it's like haphazard. So I guess I'm just wondering what you'd do if you were in our position, given that, and what you think the flaws are with that study, that why didn't we get it right? Why didn't the consultants get it right?
Yeah, I'll make a couple of observations about the study. One is, it was a snapshot in time, right? They did a market study, and it was this huge look at a lot of different markets for different positions as a snapshot in time. What we found was by the time the study was finished and delivered, the information in there was stale. That the market had already shifted, and so that made the study kind of useless in terms of we had a snapshot in time, 9 months ago or whatever, but the market has changed. What was happening, I think, is with the giant resignation that was happening coming out of COVID across all sectors, it caused the market to become very dynamic. So even now, I think the market for my lawyers, for instance, is changing. When I went to the last prosecutors meeting, I learned that Kitsap, Kittitas, Whatcom, Grace Harbor had all granted fairly substantial increases for deputy prosecutors in those counties, which again, right or wrong, that's not a statement about that. It's just, it told me that what's happening is the market is shifting even as we speak. And that's the problem with the snapshot, is you do it and then by the time you actually get to look at it, it's stale. And so it didn't help us at all. The other thing is, I still feel like it has an overly restrictive definition of market, right? Because for me, when I'm talking about lawyers, the market for lawyers is not other similarly situated counties, because I'm not losing lawyers to Kitsap County. I'm losing lawyers to Pierce County, to the AG's office, to the cities. And so when the market study comes back and says, well, we looked at a few counties that really don't have any relevance in terms of what we're trying to recruit against, it didn't help us that way either, right? Yakima, Kitsap, I think Whatcom was comparable. Whatcom, I think, just had a jump in their market. So I'm not sure what the answer is, other than I think you've got to try to create a way, and I think this was originally HR's strategy to try to do this, is that you try to keep an eye on the market on an ongoing basis somehow, instead of just doing a one-time snapshot, and then thinking that that's going to be relevant a year from now. It would take, I think, we don't have that much time, but I think ultimately that's the strategy. I don't know how we get there, but does that make sense? It was a little bit meandering there, but those are the two big problems I had, is that by the time we got the study, it was stale, it was useless for us. And I didn't feel very good about what they defined as our market.
And I want to say, and you couple that with the problem we've got with inflation, with the real cost of trying to make your house payment.
And that all came in after the study, right?
Right,
So
and that
that's a
happened
dynamic.
afterwards, so that made it, to me, double stale, I guess is the best way to put it.
Well, yeah, I mean, as long as that's hitting everyone the same, then that's not really a problem from the perspective of understanding the market, be the one jurisdiction against another. What you're describing is there was already reactions to that from different markets, so
Yeah.
it did create a comparison problem.
Yeah,
But
the
I
market
don't
was
know how
changing.
given the time, I remember this is one of those, I'm looking at Robin, because this is one of those issues where I was like, where's the market study? Where's the market study? Where's the market? Given the time it took to find the contractor and get all this, the steps with the board done and then all their work done and presented back, like, I mean, and you're saying 9 months is not current enough. It's like, I don't know how you'd ever get that. You know, and if the market's changing that fast, our contracts are 3-year contracts or whatever. So I don't know how you fix this problem. It's just a dilemma that I've really struggled with.
Maybe there's a way to do some data analysis around when we do lose people, where do they go and what are they getting paid? To at least give you some sense of what the market looks like in
That's
terms of
real
what's
data.
getting people to
Right.
jump.
Not speculating,
Yeah.
but it's true. But I just hope that people know the intent of the board was genuine to try to.
I don't doubt that for a minute.
I
Quite,
just, I know
quite respectfully, I don't doubt that for a minute, yeah.
Okay, it's 10:29. I guess, you know, just to add on some comments here. Thank you for coming in and presenting. I don't believe it was just the criminal justice that kind of has been left behind. As one of the newest commissioners, right? I've seen it all across general government. I think what we're struggling with is we grew up too quick for our breaches, like, and now, you know, there's a lot of cloth missing and our ankles are showing, right? And it's showing all across. I've seen it with these presentations. I've seen it in the past couple of years as people have come through and directors and elected officials have come through and have been asking for, you know, saying like, we need to grow because our level of service is going down to the community because we just don't have the capacity. And I think we're just in a very awkward stage right now where we are growing and we just don't have, unfortunately, the funds to be able to accommodate that growth. And, you know, kind of being stuck in this situation is, you know, not the greatest. And just, we understand the needs, we understand the, you know, the pinch point, as you stated. And we're just, you know, having to kind of look across every office and department and seeing kind of where we can alleviate some of this. And it's been, I think, something that we're gonna be struggling with during deliberations. With that, thank you again for coming. Robin?
Before we wrap, I do want to address the fund balance issue. We did start with a record $41 million fund balance in this year. But as we get closer to the end of the year, we're projecting an ending fund balance that's substantially less. The most recent prediction that I have from Darren Bennett in financial services is 33.5 million. Our latest estimate for the end of this year is closer to 34 million, but we're pretty darn close. And either way, it's a substantial reduction. The board knew that we were gonna have a record high fund balance and planned to bring that down. And what has caught us short is the flattening and downturn in certain revenue streams, along with the restriction of a 1% increase in sales tax or property tax, it's that 1% cap, combined with inflation factors that are driving our costs up just in the base. So all of the increases in next year need to be offset. And that's why they've asked, they want to make capacity for at least some of the requests, but to do that, we need to give something up.
Yeah, I totally get that. I was kind of under the impression that we'd be, my prediction may be off, is that you're gonna end up around 35 for your ending fund balance. 34, 35, right where you're at. Which, my argument is, or at least my plea is to consider that you still have capacity in that fund balance to give us a year to figure this out before we end up, an 8% cut for me $870,000, that's about 5 deputy prosecutors. And that's crippling in terms of what that cut would mean in terms of my capacity. But, you know, if we've got to go there because that's the picture that we see in 2025, I'll work with you all next year. I've always tried to work with you all to you know, to do the best we can around the budget. All I'm asking for is that maybe we take 2024 as a slowdown year and ramp down and try to plan for, if we have to, try to plan for something more in 25 if in fact we get to the point where we're at a $25 million ending fund balance and now we've got to really flatten things out.
We could wait, and then instead of 8, it'll be more like 16 to 20, which would be even harder on your office.
Yeah,
That's the impact of waiting.
well,
Because the board is looking out long-term and the forecast includes a expected upturn and all those things are factored
see,
in.
that's the thing.
Yeah.
Respectfully, I think I'm looking at the glass a little bit more full, maybe. I don't mean that
I
disrespectfully.
know Nicole thinks that we're being much more optimistic than we ought to be.
No, well,
So I'd be happy to share the details of the forecast with you so that you actually know what's in it.
that would be helpful.
Yeah,
Because I've
that'd
seen
be
state
great.
forecasts that look different, but
Sure.
yeah.
Our country's involved in 2 wars going on around the globe right now. That also is a problem on what's coming,
Mhm.
because we just don't know.
Even more downturn.
I just want to say that the point you made about the point you made about exempting sheriff deputy 24/7 is, you know, the flow is not going to decrease, and then having public defense, courts, and prosecutors cut was made emphatically by the courts, and also made, you know, little less emphatically, but also made by public defense. So I heard that loud and clear. How we're gonna manage that, I'm not sure, but I do understand.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, 10:36. Thank you. We are adjourned.